Hey guys, Dr. K sitting here thinking, was actually watching the confirmation hearings of Kennedy, thinking about all the diseases that they're talking about, chronic disease, etc., and how there's an epidemic of chronic disease. Also yesterday, we were looking at something that was the nervous system. It was a picture of the nervous system completely pulled out of the body and how that actually controls stuff. It's kind of connecting the dots, right? What are we really looking at? Mind-body connection. And what happens to the body affects the mind. What happens to the mind affects the body, right? I'm not trying to be puristic in the sense that if you think everything's going to be okay, it'll be okay. But there is scientific proof that says what we believe in determines how our body responds to things. Look at the placebo effect. There's people that get sugar pills and actually have an improvement in their physical condition from their disease process because there's a belief component that is present. And I think that's extremely important. An interesting concept. We're going to go ahead and actually jump in the M2. I have to drop something off and continue this discussion. But mind-body connection definitely exists. So as I was saying, we were watching the confirmation hearings, we were talking about chronic disease, which led me to think of how the mind-body connection works, right? We talked about that a little bit in an Instagram post yesterday. It was kind of neat. Somebody took out the entire nervous system. Important thing to remember is the nervous system, right? Peripheral nervous system goes back to the brain goes back to the peripheral nervous system. We get a thought, put meaning to that thought, and then it causes hormonal changes, and then we respond to those hormonal changes. You look at it from that perspective, it's the fear response, right? So what happens? We end up getting a hormonal release, and depending on how we view that, will kind of determine how the body responds. So what do I mean by that? Some people can get a fight or flight response. They get the hormonal release. They end up having stomach involvement. Digestion is kind of taken off the table, and the stomach tends to cramp. They freak out, and some can even pass out. But then there's other people that get that same type of feeling, but the way they train themselves is to actually be productive with that. And they use that fear or that response, that fight or flight response, for more of a positive challenge. So that happens all the time. Of course, as we've talked about before, right? Sympathetic, parasympathetic. You got the vagus nerve that kicks you back into parasympathetic, right? We could control all of that. And how do we do that? With our breath. If you learn how to breathe, what you're actually doing is gently switching from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you ever feel mind-body connection that you're having because of your thoughts and you're being extremely anxious, heart is racing, and you get a stomach ache and nauseated before a big interview, that's that fight or flight response. So how do you stop it, or how do you at least quell it a little bit? What do? You take a deep breath. Do belly breathing. You expand your abdomen while you're breathing in, and then you breathe out slow through your mouth. Why? Because that's going to go ahead and actually kick in the parasympathetic nervous system. It's going to calm everything down. Obviously, anything that we say, right? We're not going into depth here, and this isn't a university class. We're sharing ideas here. Some people, I shouldn't say all people, will swing a pendulum all the way to the right or all the way to the left. We could cure anything with our mind. And to some extent, yeah, you can cure some things, I'm sure, with your mind, and I'm sure there's studies that would support it. But I think the best approach is to be able to use common sense and kind of tap into all different things as it relates to diseases. There's a place for medicine. There's a place for mind-body connection. There's a place for meditation. Bring all of those things together in order to be able to go ahead and do the best that you can do with the circumstances that you have. We don't tend to do that. Swing the pendulum and don't use common sense or don't use moderation. You're going to end up actually in a worse position than where you were when you started. But without a doubt, mind-body connection works. And as we were talking earlier, the placebo effect. It's the Elia Crum experiment. It was a shake experiment. And for those of you who don't know, they took a group of people and they paid them. It was an experiment. And they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and give you a shake. You drink the shake and we're going to go ahead and draw your blood. What we're going to look at is what happens to ghrelin, a hormone that regulates hunger. And when you get satiated, which means when you eat something, right, it'll drop your ghrelin so that you don't continuously want to eat. First sample that they gave this group was a sensible shake, very low in calories, low in fat, low in sugar, etc. They drew the blood, they measured the ghrelin, there was a drop in ghrelin, right? Makes sense, dropped a certain amount because anytime you eat or drink something, it can change the ghrelin. They bring the same group back, they give them a decadent shake. This shake was a triple chocolate shake loaded with fat, loaded with carbohydrates, loaded with tons of sugars. They drink that shake, they go ahead and draw the blood again, and the ghrelin drops even more. Makes sense. The body was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to drop ghrelin a little bit with a sensible shake. It should drop it considerably with something that increases satiety. The catch? Same shake. So that is a mind-body connection because the mind was processing that, hey, because this is a decadent shake, what's going to happen? Our ghrelin is going to drop significantly more. But that wasn't the case. So it's very interesting. You could definitely change certain things within your hormonal milieu by the way that you look at things and by the way that the body responds to those things.